that. Look, there's electronic copy on Blackboard of the book. You need, let me do that on my other screen here and see where it's at. So I can give you guys. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a little bit about Blackboard. So we'll probably do, I want to do a little bit of a workshop for Blackboard and Zotero. So what I want to wind up doing is have you guys do that. Make sure I'll show you what have done populating on Blackboard. But as far as your question, so if you can go ahead and get on the Blackboard, if you can, log in, History 491, and so Justine, who has to ask me? You okay? I'm glad you talked about it. So go to Blackboard to the course modules, week 1, and you'll see the link to the book. And you can start reading there, electronic ebook. Also have she also got the Legacies of Dust, the library. So our library assistant, I don't even know if that's appropriate. Librarian, anyways, our research assistant. Her name is Alexis Wolstein. She sets up anything on a page there from the University Library website to assist in your research databases. And I'm not sure if she quite got the class History 491 on there yet, but she's forgot these 2 other ebooks, so you can go and start looking at that. But also starting week 3, Legacies of Dust by Shefflin. Okay. Today I want to talk about Colorado and Borderlands, but let's go ahead and do a little bit of a Zotero workshop. So what is Zotero? Has anybody got on there yet? Let's talk about Zotero. I'm sure if I want you guys to, I want to share my screen on that, or just go ahead and so I've set it up to where let's go, everybody can get on Blackboard. Okay, get on your Blackboard and log into it. Go to respective course content. I have, I'm here in History 491. So let's do a little bit of a navigation through Blackboard. And then I want to show you to get how to, Zotero is really just a free resource to use as if you put your sources in, and it'll build your bibliography. Okay, and you can put notes in there also. I've started to do that with, for example, last week's documents that I had gone over last class with Hispanic demographics from the 1990s. I don't know if you guys recall that, but I put those 2 documents on there, but I also did it through Zotero. So I want to kind of keep, I think I can do that. One thing I don't like about sharing screen, and it just brings everybody else on my screen to like 1 or 2, and I kind of, but let me try. Okay, share. All right, so now they scrunch you up to, all right, you see my screen? Are you able to look at your Blackboard and my screen? Okay, so here is, whatever I do, I send it out as an announcement. If I put something on there, I'll send it out as an announcement. Has everybody got my announcements? Okay. Trevor or Derek? Okay. So for example, here you see overview for today's class I put on there. And I put for the first time ever, I'm set up as a YouTube channel. That's what they were. Brooke and, yes, I'm bringing Brooke and Aiden in here. We'll wait for them. Brooke, Aiden? Can you hear me, Aiden, Brooke?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Okay. Right now we're looking at go into your Blackboard, log into your Blackboard into the particular our course content, and I have shared. I'm sharing the screen here. Of course, you probably don't want to see that. So what I do is everybody needs to start getting also comfortable with getting onto Colorado History, ColoradoHistoricNewspapers.org. Who has yet to get on there? This is something I need you guys to start getting onto. It's again, you can register for free. You can look and search without having to log in or register, but if you want to download it or clip a newspaper article or the file itself, you got to register and log in, but it's free. Let's go to course modules. Well, yeah, let's go to course modules. And Victoria, you should probably, this should be mirroring your Chicano Studies 491. Everything I do on here, I just copy to Chicano Studies course content. So you see week 1 that's gone past, and then you see the link to McCoy. Week 2. So continue to see what we have for current successes today, or like we started last Thursday with. Oh, here we go. I guess talk about Blackboard real quick. That's what we're doing now. We'll go into Zotero, but here's something I wanted to, this link is to a lecture webinar that we'll look at for a few minutes here in a moment in regards to how we can look at, I believe it's helpful for a moment to look at Arkansas Valley, upper Arkansas River as a borderland. Not making that up, that if you remember, before 1848, Arkansas River was the northern boundary, essentially, of New Mexico, as in the nation of Mexico. So look at that in a moment. But let's get to Zotero. If I can remember. Let's see where. Okay, course modules. Course module. Week 3. Okay. Now let's go to, let's see, week 1. Okay, so this I put what we walked through last week within the week 1 folder. All right, and if you were to click on like the Hispanic American Demographic Marketing Report, and that will pop up. And that's on there. But what I've done is go ahead and go to Zotero, www.zotero.org, Zotero, and see if I logged in or not. And if you haven't registered yet on there, go ahead. I'll give you guys a moment. So this is it's kind of a workshop we're doing right now. I can't remember if I logged in as a, okay. And I should have sent you an invite to your email to what I have uploaded to here. That was that should have been last Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure if you guys got that or not. Okay, so let's see, where am I? So really just looking at my library and the folder that for this class I've shared as an invite to you guys. I just wanted to do verify and kind of work through the kinks on that and whether or not this will work with me sharing as a group this class. I may have, trying to remember which folder I had. Actually, research study NPS. So I'm not really sure. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll hold off until later on this and where I figure out where I was on this. But what you want to do is, well, stuff I'm going to put on Blackboard as far as the documents, the sources, and this is going to be linked to Zotero.org. And so you're going to have your source list. And then from the source list, you can build your bibliography and you're going to be able to build your timeline. You can go into there and build your timeline. You also have the Zotero app on your desktop, and then that way you can go in and then see everything that we're looking at as I post to and build, populate Blackboard and also Zotero. So this is just strictly to what we'll be talking about in the class. So let's go ahead, and I want to make sure you guys are registered in Zotero. Does everybody have any issues with that, or can go do that? Have you been able to do that? Okay, if everybody give me a thumbs up on that, then I'm not sure why. I'll probably may take a moment to figure out which folder I had put in here. Okay, I don't want to waste any more of your time trying to figure out what that is. I want to go ahead and go back and see what we have. So these other two, these other ones that I wanted to talk about in regards to current demographics. So did anybody have any chance to kind of work with what is compared to today as far as what we may have, what we did look at last week in regards to demographics compared from the 1990s?
One thing I noticed was the Hispanic population went from 13% back in the 1990s to 21.3% in some of the more current numbers. So it has risen.
Yes. Yeah. So for Pacific to Colorado or overall?
For Colorado as a whole.
Okay. That is important. It is very important thing. What other factors do you think that may have played into that increase? Or is it just economics, job-wise? I'm going to go ahead and stop share, I think, for now. Okay, there you are. Okay, here I am. So what is the factors within that, the increase in population? And as far as within an increase of population, um, what positive or challenging or challenges are within that aspect?
One thing that I noticed in a comparison between like the older documents and the more recent ones, there are a lot more like specific different types of Hispanics that are recorded in the more modern ones. So they could be counting more groups into the Hispanic as well, or, you know, recognizing that difference, so that could play into an increase.
Yeah, yes. I think that the regards to that could be a I know that was somewhat of a touchy subject for coming up here on the 2020 census, which is that's a rather a social factor, but I think it's important to understand that why are we using that as a tool? Now, of course, topic that topic can be a rabbit hole for me in this class in regards to immigration. So, but I want to focus more on the identity of that, how are they identified, but more in regards to labor and agriculture. So if we say that a certain group of people are becoming more in the population, so I would say that in Colorado, especially Denver and Colorado Springs and Pueblo, that pretty soon the majority will be within that a group of people. But what else? What else did you see in regards to like the 1990s up until like the 21st century and I think some of the data was from just the last couple of years.
I thought the data on language was actually really interesting, just like in comparison wise, because in the what's it called, the marketing report under average Hispanic consumer talked about how the language category states that the average Hispanic consumer is bilingually fluent, but perhaps but prefers Spanish. Sorry, I'm messing up my words. But whereas the Latino Leadership Institute stated that it kind of gave more information overall. And it broke it down into those who only speak English at home, those with various levels of speaking Spanish. But the one that I particularly thought was interesting was that it talked about how the highest percentage was where English is the preferred language, but they do still speak Spanish at home since it's important to Latino culture. And that seemed to be like the one thing that's carried over from both articles. The marketing one specifically points out that, well, they're bilingual. Spanish is preferred to be used at home due to cultural aspects. So I just thought that was interesting.
No, let's see. Did anybody have a follow through or segue into the cultural aspect of language, or how the language or bilingual is it as important compared from the 1990s to now? So it's going to be important as far as we look into this aspect of comparing our comparative analysis. Really is how we're going to look at the increase of population that will increase, and then how we look at language itself and its importance, and the cultural aspect. So one of the things we'll touch upon in regards to that, I know a lot of my what we'll be pushing out in the next few weeks is labor and defining that in a modern sense, I guess, so to speak, and then, well, just defining what agriculture is in a modern aspect, but its impact within a social, economic, and cultural. So what I wanted to do is give you an idea what needs to happen in the rest of this class as we go towards the aspect of building your what will become you're looking at all the sources I will be building upon in Blackboard and Zotero, and you're going to make a comparison. And that comparison is important because within time, okay, you got these different times. All right, but more specifically, as we get towards later in the semester, whether I'm not in regards to like when the Chicano movement stepped up in regards to 1960s through, is there a certain time period, late mid 70s, early 80s, or is it still going on? So these are kind of questions you can ask yourself. When I say that, I literally mean you need to build your research question, your research problem. Whether or not there's still challenges today in regards to those specific demographics. As you see the success within more of middle class or upper middle class, higher income, social mobility, or there's still a vulnerable or marginalized group within the state of Colorado in this history. So I really need to look at that. Now we've mentioned a couple things. So what was the language? Okay, that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest things you guys mentioned. And what was the other one? I'm trying to remember. So it was language, and just and population. So what I want you guys to do is break it down a little bit further. Now remember within these reports, what other aspects, what other traits, I guess you can call it, of statistics within population and language. That was income, most particularly in what was considered at poverty level or below. What else? What else did we, is there anything else that stuck out that might have been brought out within the Latino research or Hispanic map 2017 other than what we just talked about?
So I found research done in 2014 that found the poverty rate of Hispanics 17 and younger to be 28%. And then it also discussed like Hispanics without health insurance to be about 21%, which I found extremely interesting because health insurance can get expensive. But there's only 28% of them,
Okay.
Hispanics 17 and younger, are in the poverty range.
So health, medical, not the aspects of current few years of this administration in regards to healthcare. What else? Anybody else? Anybody who healthcare? How about kids or mothers or education? Where within those nouns I just mentioned or people, what specifically did you see within that?
In the realm of education, I was looking at it, and specifically with the high school dropout rates for Hispanics was very high in the 1990s and has started kind of to drop down lower to where it lies with most of the rest of the other ethnicities, though it is still kind of higher than most of them.
Okay.
But it's dropped down massively.
Okay, good. But anybody else? Okay, so what I need you guys, everybody to do is I'm helping you out build what I'm looking at as we like to next week is your first deep discussion response. So you're gonna look, let's talk about that real quick. So what we're talking about here is what we're gonna be looking at continually as a send out to building more evidence and a decision to make on, okay, well, everything, is it everybody, I don't want to push forth what everything, somebody can make a call, everything's fine and dandy. Somebody can make that call if they want, but you're going to have to justify it. And so I really like to get back to what I want you guys to do for the class, and that's the statement of needs or statement of protest. Really, it's just building the same amount of writing, looking at pretty much the same kind of evidence. But you're making a call. It's like, look, no, not everything's fine and dandy, or everything has. There's been a lot of improvements, but there's still challenges. Economically, still very vulnerable. Are there still vulnerable groups? Are there still, what vulnerable groups is that? Is it the same as within the 1960s up until now? Okay. That's something I wanted to, you need to start building your list, and really don't just not 1990s and 2020, but as we go ahead and get into the history of agriculture and labor in Arkansas Valley, I'll be getting around to really close to the turn of the 20th century. And agriculture in a modern sense is actually introduction of a certain kind of vegetable or fruit that isn't necessarily indigenous to that area. For example, sugar beets. Sugar beets wasn't grown there naturally. That was a cash crop, and how something is introduced and requires a lot of labor to produce and process and get out to the market brings itself its own challenges, negatively and positively. And then respects to the majority of the time given, especially in that area from what I see, because I'm putting this class together, that the challenges hasn't quite been quantified at all. A lot of that has been started though and looked at with CSU Pueblo and in Pueblo. But for extending out in regards to the agricultural part, remains to be seen. And most especially until now, because now I've got you guys looking at some analysis on hemp starting to grow here in Colorado and in the Arkansas Valley. It's being grown all over the place in the state, but in Arkansas Valley too. Okay, I think anybody got anything else? I think I wanted to use this kind of perspective as you go into next week's your first discussion response. Okay. Well, okay, so let me bring over the slides. So we got a little bit of Zotero, we got a little bit of, I want you guys to get comfortable with that, because you're gonna, everything you're gonna, I've mentioned this a couple of times already, but get in there. And that way, I don't want you guys, the reason for this is I don't want you guys to spend too much time with organizing the sources. I want you to spend more time analyzing the sources. So is this kind of making it easy, upper division, history 491? Okay, yeah, a little bit, but really it's going to be where I want you guys to quickly gather the timeline, the period of time and the timeline, because I want you to look at it, and it's going to be where you're going to make a decision and say, okay, today, 2020, where are we within this aspect of agriculture and labor and, hemp, for example, and with other people working. So I'm going to share the screen again. So I suppose you guys see yourselves here. I'll put you over here. I guess I could start. I talked, we met each other the other day. I guess it's my turn to some extent, not to bore you. Let me go ahead and get this going. Can, does that look okay? Okay, we'll go ahead with that. Let me see if I can. Okay. Anybody having a hard time reading that? Okay, me. What do you want to know about me? For a second. Turned 53 years old here 2 days ago. Why I mentioned that really is just at the same amount of time is when Magdalena Avila started up as a Head Start teacher in the summer 1967 in Grenada, Colorado. He had been just enrolled at UC Boulder. When he enrolled at UC Boulder, he had a hard time getting enrolled, and he started taking classes but hadn't quite been enrolled. And he stayed in his car, slept in his car for a few days till somebody felt sorry for him and had them stay in their respective dorm room. But he applied through the Colorado Migrant Council that just was stood up at the time there in Boulder, with others more concerned about conditions of migrants and their living conditions and housing conditions. So he became a Head Start teacher down in Grenada for that summer, 1967. So I was born in May. He started around about the same time, and he taught them a little bit of theater to kind of just address. I think they're just elementary school. Till this day, he's a poet. But from there, he went to other areas of Colorado, and especially central Colorado, when they started with like the lettuce strike. I think it was lettuce. Yes, the migrant workers at that time, 69 or 70, he was asked to go down there and help them with protest, just go on strike, stop their work, just stop in the middle of working in the fields, and say we're not going to work until we have better wages. We'll get into that a little bit. Just give you a heads up on what where I came from on that. It was a good segue into how long it's been. Former military, I guess I could tell you, I was in the Army for 21 and a half years up until 2014. Then I just went back and got my master's degree at UCCS in history. And then I started teaching as an adjunct there at CSU Pueblo in 2018. Taught history of modern China, which is sort of more my subfield, academic subfield, history of modern Asia. So here you see how I'm bringing in the Japanese American Relocation Center and Japanese Americans. And we will be talking about Japanese Americans within aspect of labor in the sugar. They're migrating to the area of Colorado there in Arkansas Valley when they brought in sugar beets and other crops. So let's just go ahead. I think that's a little bit enough for me about me. So upcoming weeks, this is what we'll do is here are things I just wanted to show you. If you can see that, I want to make sure you guys can see that, right? Upcoming weeks. Everybody can see that? Okay, good. All right. This is just something I want to hit up on the first slide so you guys get an idea of what we're going to go into. Of course, this is not a significant change to the syllabus or the schedule in the syllabus. So this is just something I highlight a little bit more specific within the syllabus. Really, what we're going to do is not everything, because most of what I've looked at and what I'll be giving you guys does deal with southeastern Colorado and a little bit of southwestern Kansas, because Arkansas River extends through there, and then before it gets it goes through Kansas, but then it starts dipping towards the southeast to Arkansas, and dips into Mississippi. Okay. But we'll look at, it seems like by the end of the week or by a certain time, we'll be looking at southeastern Colorado. That's because that's where most of my research was specific to the Oral History Project, and I knew that agriculture and labor had something to do with it. But you'll see how the microcosm, the specific area, will tie in with certain events, certain people, the more overarching history of the Arkansas Valley in agriculture and labor-wise, okay? One of the things we'll make sure we'll talk about is what's called homesteading. Homesteading was this is an important topic, and how people, mostly the white settlers, those coming from the east, started to move west. And of course, after the Mexican-American War, 1848, as they started to settle with their overarching policy of manifest destiny. But within that settlement and farming, I'll talk about land plats. And I want you guys I want to go over how to read a map in most basic sense, because I think it's important. When the General Land Office came out and they started the homestead, well, they had to turn everything and survey it in little squares, okay? And but we'll talk about what I think is important. What is labor? As we get towards the later part of the 19th century, really the definition of labor changed, like for example, with the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the early part of the 19th century. Well, we won't dwell on that part. Okay, what we'll do is what it looked like as we got into the late part of the 19th century, early part of 20th century. Okay, we did already follow-up discussion on Hispanic demographics, 1990s and present. Now, remember that really what you're going to see is what you want to do towards the end of as we get towards the midterm and final, is more the late 60s and 70s at the period of the Chicano movement. Done that, if you please make sure you guys have done that. Okay, so here we are. Let's go with the concept of Colorado and borderlands. I think I asked last week, has anybody taken History of America Southwest at the university yet? Well, I think it's something I will need to discuss with you guys as overall general, and what it means to be borderlands. So I think it's best that I go ahead and we're going to look at this video that I put up on the Blackboard. we'll only watch it for a few minutes because Professor Sens just discusses what Borderlands is. So what is Borderlands? Anybody have an idea as far as within a history class or history overall, what does it mean to be Borderlands? So nobody has yet to come within this concept yet? All right. That's fine. That's cool. I'm all right with that. So what we'll do is it's really within, well, especially with the other field that we're looking at, like Chicano studies. This is important within history because just because you built a line across a certain land, like for example, that Arkansas River was the northern boundary of New Mexico, Mexico itself, nation of Mexico at the time, before 1848. All right. And as the U.S. pushed through on their initial steps of being rather imperialistic, I guess you would say, that changed with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and Arkansas River was no longer the boundary. Then it was pushed down to the Rio Grande. That became the political boundary, geographical political boundary. But as you understand that already, as the Spanish came across and the conquistadors in the 16th century, that area of Mexico and American Southwest, that was Spain. Then Mexico gained independence, fought against the French, and that became part of over 300 years, that long, hundreds of years before the U.S. came across in 1848, really even before that, in 1820. So the culture didn't change. The people didn't all of a sudden become American. Concept of their citizenship or who they are, their identity was still there in regards to whoever it was. Okay, and it wasn't just white settlers. So the political boundary changed, but borderlands surrounding what was the border was there, and that's kind of a framework that we can get into to discuss. And I think is pertinent when we talk about the history of agriculture and labor. Anybody have any thoughts on that so far? Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and we'll watch this and get back to it. We won't watch it all. We'll just watch the first few minutes.
The volume turned up, but it does appear as though sound is working through Zoom. So as Eric was mentioning, about 3 years ago, there was a convening of scholars to think about the future of History Colorado, next steps with regards to programming and where to go. And it was entitled, the symposium was entitled The Borderlands of Southern Colorado. And what I'm doing today is kind of a continuation of some ideas that were started as part of that original symposium all that time ago. But looking at the borderlands as a different sort of historical framework from the frontier history that is usually the framework used to talk about the history of the West. So if the frontier is about binaries of one group conquering another, the borderlands is a more complex, fluid, and shifting place. To kind of frame what I'm talking about, I want to first start with a quote from Pekka Hamalainen, and Samuel Truitt, two scholars who have written on this concept, they write, if frontiers are places where we once told our master American narratives, then borderlands are the places where those narratives come unraveled. They are ambiguous and often unstable realms where boundaries are also crossroads, peripheries are also central places, homelands are also passing through places, and the endpoints of empire are also forks in the road. If frontiers are spaces of narrative closure, then borderlands are places where stories take unpredictable turns and rarely end as expected. They go on to say, let's see if I can switch slides here. There we go. They go on to talk about some of the themes and sort of stories that appear in Borderlands history. Tales of economic exchange, of cultural mixing, and political contestation. So not stories of isolation, but rather histories of cultures colliding and interacting with one another. They go on to say that these are histories anchored in spatial mobility, so looking at change over time and how people adjust to movement and shifting boundaries and frontiers. Situational identity, so the way in which one person's role within society might shift depending on their geographic location or sense of place. Local contingency, kind of related to that as well, not just in a sense of class and social hierarchy, but also of the specific context in which that person lives, and also ambiguities of power. And I think this particular theme is particularly instructive for how to think about Anza and his role within the history that I'm looking at for the purposes of this evening. So, let's see here, I can advance the slide again. Some of you might be wondering who Anza was. Anza's a personality from the history of 18th century Spanish New Mexico and the larger Spanish Southwest. Really a product of this borderland environment, grew up in a family that was on the Sonoran borderland with the communities to the north. In California, he is perhaps best known for leading an overland route into the Bay Area. So the first mission community settled in California is San Diego de Alcalá in 1769. Within about 5 years, there's a hope to provision California overland, so not having to rely on boats in the ocean. And so he kind of pioneers that route. He then follows that up in 1775, 1776 with an overland route that includes settlers. And then shortly after that, he's appointed as the Spanish governor of New Mexico, a position he holds for about 10 years. And his role in all of this is largely seen to be stopping the threat posed by the Comanche Empire to not only New Mexico and the Spanish colony there, but the very communities that surround Spanish New Mexico, and which in some form or another are sort of informally allied or to some degree directly influenced by the presence of the Spanish. So this kind of gets to the problem or the sort of curiosity that I have for tonight. We tend to talk about the 1779 excursion into what is today Colorado as Anza's expedition or Anza's campaign, really attributing a high degree of agency to the role of Anza in constructing this campaign and facilitating its ultimate success. But if you notice on the slide I have presented here, that campaign includes a really varied cast of characters, 645 persons in all, though I should say that the numbers vary a little bit depending on the source. Among that number, there are persons who identify as Spaniards. There are some persons who identify as being Genízaro, or that is a sort of person of a Christianized identity, but from a native ancestry. A number of persons who identify as part of one of the Pueblo communities from along the Rio Grande Valley. The Utes that I'll be talking about in particular, and also the Jicarilla Apache who joined the campaign as it's already underway. So we can't really call this strictly a Spanish expedition or a Spanish campaign. And so part of what I'm trying to do with the history of this particular episode from history is think about this as a plural moment or a plural social gathering in which we have a kind of coalition working together against what is perceived to be a common threat, namely the Comanche. So this is the map produced by.
Okay. All right. I hope that gave you some perspective on what we can see at the area and history as borderlands. So can just so make sure that this is on this is on well, it is on YouTube, but it is also here, week 2 folder on course modules. If you like to watch it again or watch it in its entirety, he does talk about more of the Anza expedition, but you see how he began that that discussion in regards to what it means to be borderlands. So that's what I want to use as we start to go into, like with Thursday or this week, and at least touch upon that period before we get to the latter part of the 19th century and agriculture and labor. All right. See at least the history of people whose history is not necessarily provided to within the public or the popular narrative. The use of the borderlands is helpful in that respect, at least within academia. All right. So I think it's rather straightforward. I think we'll go into a bit about history for Thursday. Let me go back to my slides, and that way I don't, talk out of turn, so to speak. Let's see what I got here. And I hope everyone's okay. I know it's 11:26, so I don't want to put you to sleep or anything. So does anybody have any thoughts about that? Okay. So again, I want to know for myself, for you guys, what period am I talking about for most of the time? So we'll talk about the Spanish frontier in North America, as you saw there with Anza. Of course, then the French, later Mexican independence, hence the term of New Mexico. They're in part of really the frontier, northern frontier part of Mexico after they gained independence from the Spanish. But of course, at the same time, you saw President Jefferson's, at the time, 1800s, 1806, 1807, where Louisiana Purchase was able to expand west of the Mississippi, of course, mostly the Midwest, but Texas, of course. But the Spanish New Mexico disputed a certain how far west that went. So what we'll do is, this will be my, we'll step into for Thursday. What I'm going to do though is let you guys watch that for, if you'd like, Professor Sens. And we'll talk about, really what we'll talk about is, real quick, that whole time, the whole 300 years, and in a nutshell on Thursday. So we'll get into Coronado, him coming up to seeing the Arkansas River here in 1540. Really brief. We'll talk about the Santa Fe Trail that came through in 1821, 1848 or so, and then talk about an area of homesteading that was called Boggsville, Boggsville. But I want to go ahead and also, as you can see, we're going to start talking about self-identity. and just even with the big concept of borderlands is very important as far as on the, is the distinctness even more culturally of people that were within New Mexico. They became a distinct group other than just being what would be other part or like the rest of Mexico. They were Nuevos Mexicanos. And this distinction is will be very important because the question is going to be where, okay, so Southern Colorado, that's the borderlands, as you can see, of as you know, you see within the early part of the 19th century and until now, group of people who are in the area and are, you know, this Nuevo Mexicanos, because of New Mexico, northern part of New Mexico, and the southern part, south central, southwestern part of Colorado were in themselves became within that 300-year time span, but most especially after 1848 with the land grants and Mexico trying to hold on to their land, but land grants in the early part of the, or mid part of the 19th century. So we'll see that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and leave it at that for now. Those are the things we'll talk about on Thursday. Those are the things I'll be putting on to Blackboard. And as we get towards, Thursday, some of you probably wonder, well, when are we going to start talking about agriculture within the area? So Thursday, I mentioned Bogsville. That's when we'll get started. All right, that's when we'll get started. I wanted to at least provide this whole time with looking at demographics, looking at what should be looked at as borderlands. Up until this very day, you will see how, looking at this way, borderlands, how well, you'll to compare the challenge, whether or not there's still challenges. Okay. Thursdays, that's what we'll do. I want to make sure I'm going to start putting stuff up on Blackboard and BB. So you're going to start seeing primary sources. I wish I just, what else am I going to talk about? Any questions? What do we got coming up? I've talked about what's coming up. What else we got? Any questions, concerns? Thursday, make sure you get in here and finish the book by Thursday. All right. I don't have anything for you strictly for this book. All right. Strictly. As I said from the beginning, I want you guys to enjoy reading it. I would hope by now that you will see that he talks about a lot of stuff that went on as he rolled down the Arkansas or walked the parts that he couldn't walk or boat. So finish that. For next week's this discussion response, accumulation of what you have been presented to you or have read will be part of that. And Thursday also go over the rubric for that discussion response. So everything you see, even the elevations book, along with concept of borderlands and the demographics. So you bring those in and combine them for next week, first discussion response. And we'll go over what I want to look at grade-wise, the rubric. All right. Any questions? Nothing? Let me get you guys back to make sure everybody's still on board here. Yes, I like Star Wars. So yeah, that's me. That's me. So, um, oh, one more thing, one or two more things. I'm glad I remind myself. This is probably what I should have put in the syllabus. As we get closer, there's going to be stuff I'm going to put out within a historic perspective that other sources are identifying these groups that are going to be offensive. So, for example, I'm going to give you a heads up on when that's going to happen. For example, of course, with Japanese immigrated at the time around the turn of the 20th century, and the attitude towards them had racial attitudes. So they're going to project that the use of the term for Japanese was in the history books, and of course was in newspapers and stuff. So that's an example. I'll give you guys heads up on that. So we're also talking, unfortunately, about Mexican Americans or with Mexican national. As we get closer towards like around Bracero program and their attitude towards Mexicans immigrating and working, just came, what they called it, I'm not even going to talk about it right now. I will give you guys heads up. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that. We'll use these terms, racial stereotype, in a more historical terms. So anybody got I'll let you guys know. I'll give you a heads up. I don't want anybody to think I'm demeaning anybody. So when we get to like the 1960s, especially, I want to make sure that, yeah, you guys cool with that? I'll let you know. I won't be, and look at the syllabus and when we start talking about the Bracero program after World War II and to the 60s, then all that. But especially, of course, when we start talking about immigration of Japanese into Colorado, and the racial attitudes there. Just thought I'd give you a heads up on that. All right, nothing? No questions?
So, I'm still waiting on the elevations book. I kind of ordered it too late.
It's on there. It's on Blackboard.
Okay.
Do you see that? If you want to start looking at it that way. Anybody else having problems with books? Okay. I get a sense that you like the in the hands hard copy. I've asked students from past classes that, and at the time I was kind of surprised, but no. Yeah, yeah, you don't have to start with there's no real deadline other than next week. And whether you bring in that too with your discussion response, the first one, okay, like I just mentioned. So you can kind of are you expecting it to get in or get to
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm expecting it sometime either this week or next.
Okay, so we'll get started with the first couple chapters on the link on Blackboard, which really goes to the library website, and there it was Alexis Wolstein that provided that. She went as far as getting it ordered for the library. So we'll start that, and then as we get towards next week and when the first discussion response is due, then hopefully your book will come in and finish it that way. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, we'll start. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, of course, next week, I've been getting a lot of emails about when am I supposed to get on I think there's others out there whether or not this first couple weeks on the Zoom really counts. Told them, well, look at the syllabus, and no, it's not counting until next week. But I told what I say, feedback on the book and what we talked about today and demographics can be built upon your first weekly response for next week. So the first couple of weeks was built this way because of concerns a bit being online. So I kind of stepped back initially, and be aware though that starting next week, the expectation of me starting to assess is going to be ramped up. Okay, I wanted to start really easy, but next week is week 3. As far as looking at why don't we put it on Blackboard and Zotero. Any issues with that organization, let me know. I want you guys to see the timeline. All right. If I'll stand by again, thanks a lot, but I'll stand by if anybody's got any concerns or questions. I'll see you Thursday.
Have a good day.
Yeah. Oh, nobody, nobody likes me.